Well, greetings everybody. My name is Michael Price. I'm the president of a company here in the Valley called MPA Networks. And I founded the company 35 years ago, so I've been doing this a while. And our specialty is, I live in a world of data centers and a world of recurring revenue business models for the past 15 or 20 years. Our firm is kind of a pioneer in that space. And now what's cool is everybody wants a recurring business model, you know. And we'll talk a little bit about what the reasons are for that. But one of the main ones is you make more money typically with a recurring model than not, depending how you price your terms and conditions. So we'll talk about that a little bit. We also host apps for software companies and for customers of software companies. You know, a lot of guys that write the code, and at that point, you don't want to deal with it anymore. You don't want to deal with security, backup, access, login, and support. So we handle that for a lot of companies. But in doing so, I've seen lots of different business models, and kind of a student of different software business models and hardware business models. So what I'm going to talk about today, about subscription revenue. Some of us call it SaaS, but it doesn't have to be just software. I'll give you kind of a view of the ecosystem, how you can make more money doing it, some other benefits. And then I think it'd be fun if we had some time today to work with a couple of you about your recurring business revenue models, what you're thinking about, and see if we can maybe hone the model a little or help out with some of the concepts. I'd like you to get some value out of this today. So, okay, so this is typical, right? Person who runs your company, and sounds like she's back there in the back. She wants this, right? You want that. You want more revenue. A sustainable revenue model would be really nice because you have to make payroll and pay the coders and everybody else, so you need money coming in. You know, you like to have a software as a service model, but maybe you don't know how to do it. You've never done it before, haven't seen it in action. You know, you really don't want to put your foot in the muck and do what a lot of companies do, which is have a really good developer spend their time trying to figure out how to turn your app into a software as a service model, or deal with you know, data centers hosting end users that call with questions about, you know, how the heck, your app's great, but I can't print, right? It's like the last thing you want to do. So those kind of fun slides. So I don't know, like 20, 25 years ago, I remember going to a Microsoft meeting. It's a really interesting meeting for some of their top dealers in the Bay Area. And at the meeting, they told us about a metric they had. And it was a metric I'd never heard of before, and I've hardly ever seen it in print. And the metric was, they said it was the most important metric at all of Microsoft. And they said it was, I can't remember the exact number, it's been a while, but it was like 19 bucks. I'm like, what is this 19 bucks? And they said, well, we take all the money that people write us checks for around the world, send us credit cards and whatever, all the money that comes into Microsoft, all the revenue, and we divide it by the number of people that use our products. And the number we get is like 19 bucks. And I thought, that's really strange because our clients are spending, I don't know, $300, $400 a year on Microsoft products, right? Where does this $19 came from? And they said, well, we don't really like to talk about it, but everybody's pirating us, right? We can't make any money in China, for example. It's just terrible. And so $19 is, that's what we make. And you know, we're this huge multi-billion-dollar company, and we're only making 19 bucks, right? And our big marketing goal for the next year is to get it from 19 to like 19 and 25 cents. And I was like, oh, that's really interesting. So if you get a Microsoft O365 account now, it costs $4 a month for your email. You get email, wow, $4 cheap, right? That's a lot more than 19 bucks a year that they used to get, right? And that's just for the email product line. So, and Microsoft for years and years and years had flat revenue, flat stock price on Wall Street. It created some challenges, and now that's changed. Any of you work for Adobe? No, you don't. Good. Okay, so Adobe has a program they call Creative Cloud. I call it Creative Banking. And this is a graph. The blue lines here is Adobe's total revenue. And the first arrow here is in 2013 when they introduced Creative Cloud, which is where they charge a monthly fee for Photoshop and other things rather than charging a flat fee. And look at what's happened to the revenue in the 4 or 5 years since then. It just took off. You know, these are some of the big players in the marketplace, but and in a way they're kind of late to the game. But especially Adobe, once they figured it out, wow, made a big difference in their P&L in a big way. And all of us, no matter what size company we work for, whether we work for the Microsofts or the Adobes of the world, or you have an app and you're starting out, it pays to think about this. The consumer is willing to pay far more money for an app if they can pay a monthly fee for it, and if it sounds relatively cheap to them. And even though over time, they're spending a whole lot more money than they would have otherwise. And you might as well be on the receiving end of that at your company. So the old model of charging, a fee for an app, no matter how expensive it is, and then recharging it every time a new version comes out or not is something to be careful about. There are a bunch of benefits of a subscription model, but the biggest one is just you make more money, generally speaking, depending on how you handle the terms and conditions. And you can increase reliability of the app by having it hosted, in various data centers around the planet. The app can become more reliable than it can be if the customer runs it on their own machines. You can outsource more support sometimes with the recurring revenue model because there's more money to go around to pay for the ecosystem of people to keep the whole app running. In other words, you can leverage yourself. Another issue today with, in Silicon Valley here, we're writing a lot of apps that are, go on mobile. I think you mentioned you're doing that on devices and so on, but there's still a massive infrastructure of apps out there that are still being built and still being serviced that, run on big computers, big iron, Mac, PC operating systems. That's still the majority of a lot of what's going on around the planet. By having a monthly fee program that you can host someplace as opposed to having software that just gets downloaded by the client and stays on their machine, something that phones home can be really helpful. Clients are asking for this kind of stuff now. A lot of clients expect a hosted solution for most apps now, and a lot of software manufacturers are a little flat-footed about that. Not all of them, but a surprising number. Some people say, well, we can't host that particular app, or we can't host that utility, or something like that. And what we've discovered is that there's a whole lot of stuff that you can host, and there's also a whole lot of stuff you can charge monthly fees for that you might never have thought about before, including bundling of software with hardware. I know that sounds like a simple concept, but so many of us will write an app that can run on different hardware platforms, but they don't deliver it on the hardware platform, right? Or they don't deliver it with another product that can fit on the hardware platform. There's a bunch of, people think, oh, if it's hardware, or if it's something that I pay a single fee for, then that's something, for some reason people think you can't rent that. You can't charge a monthly fee for it. And what we found is you can turn almost any business model into a recurring revenue model if you think about it and plot it out, even ones that people don't expect. So I'll give you an example of a completely different industry, for example, where a recurring revenue model is fairly disruptive, and that would be the industry of medicine, right? So in medicine, it's pretty much transaction-based. You go to the doctor, you pay a fee, insurance company pays part of it, you pay part of it. But there are medical models now where you can go sign up with a doctor and pay a monthly fee for the doctor's help, and that doctor shall help you no matter what it takes, as long as you keep paying that monthly fee. So it's really interesting. I walk around actually thinking about recurring revenue models all the time, and I'll see a company and go, God, it could disrupt that company and make it recurring. So don't just assume that you can't, that you have to, what's a better way to say that? I think you can assume that there's an awful lot of things you can make recurring that still aren't out there. This slide only applies to legacy apps. There's a lot of apps out in the marketplace that aren't new. They've been around for a while. They're running on old code, or accounting systems around the world and such. But those apps still solve real-world problems in the real world today. They don't solve old problems. They solve new ones that are still happening. And those sorts of apps, those are primed to be turned into a software as a service model. And we see a lot of manufacturers, software manufacturers and coders that just don't think that way sometimes. So that could be definitely eye-opening. One thing we've been seeing some more of recently, which is an interesting concept, is the concept of, there's not really an industry term for it that I know of, but it's the concept of taking a particular app and adding to it some other apps, and maybe some utilities, and maybe ones that you write or you don't write, into kind of a unified unit that solves the customer's problem for them. Because there's so many software companies now, and so often they work in an ecosystem of just themselves, or they work under Apple's ecosystem where they'll supply an app through the Apple Store or through the Microsoft Store or whatever, but they're not working with the other app manufacturers who might have complementary apps. And I'd encourage you to think about your own software, how it's delivered to customers, or how, if you have a startup, how you envision delivering it, and if it makes sense to partner with companies who have complementary products to yours. And work with their dev team, work with their marketing team, and think about the ways in which you might be able to partner. And a lot of that's anathema to the way companies work in the Valley, I think. But it can be fantastic for revenue streams. And clients like apps that fit together to solve a business problem. It's the old, there's an old story about drills. Nobody goes to the hardware store to buy a drill. The only reason they go to the hardware store to buy a drill is because they want to make holes. They want to buy holes, they don't want to buy a drill. So don't think.
That's kind of related to the explosion of like the API integration, data integration markets.
Right.
The acquisition by Salesforce of MuleSoft just happened,
Exactly. And the Blue Wolf, the Blue Wolf IBM deal, right? So I love that example. I mean, for those of you who don't know, there's a company in San Francisco called Blue Wolf, IBM bought them. Blue Wolf is one of the biggest Salesforce integrators,
consultants,
setup-uppers,
Right.
They make Salesforce happen because it's really difficult when you buy Salesforce to make it work the way you want it to on your own. That's like really hard. They don't tell you that. So Blue Wolf does that. Well, IBM bought Blue Wolf, and that goal is to integrate IBM's artificial intelligence Watson engine, which is they've been working on for a zillion years. I was at a seminar earlier this morning. They talked about AI. No, it was the keynote, right? Talked about AI and how it hadn't done anything in 30 years. I'm thinking, well, he hasn't talked to IBM. Anyway, the goal of this merger is to integrate the Watson artificial intelligence engine with Salesforce's CRM products, so they can figure out all kinds of new ways to market stuff to us and influence political campaigns and the rest.
But there's definitely customer pain there in the
Yes.
B2B enterprise market.
There's a lot. And so customers aren't purchasing an individual app necessarily. You may think your app is the best thing since sliced bread, and that's great, but the customer may not be purchasing just the app. They might be purchasing as part of an ecosystem of other things they need to solve the problem. And it's not unusual that you can figure out ways to maybe increase your revenue and increase the benefit to the customer, and even obtain more sales by getting partnerships with other app manufacturers that your competitors might miss. And that could just lever your app tremendously, for example. So this is an example of this kind of thing in a different context. We do a lot of implementations these days of VDI, or the new name for it is cloud workspaces. This is where a person has an icon on their tablet or their laptop, and they log in, and up comes a desktop that's in Iowa somewhere, right? And literally, and your apps are on that, and you can run an app that's delivered, an accounting system or some other kind of application there. But we can also layer in apps from other third-party companies in there and do integration so that they tie in together.
Thin clients you're talking about, right?
WinFrame,
thin clients.
Yeah, exactly. And they've been around for a long time, 20, 25 years, then type clients have been around. But what's really interesting about VDI is that only in the last, I'd say 3 or 4 years, has VDI type technology become technologically feasible and economically feasible for small, medium companies. It used to be only big companies could do it. But now you have a firm with 2 or 3 or 5 employees, they can actually afford a VDI solution and have it work for them. And that creates a whole new market for software that can be delivered through that kind of a platform where you're putting a package together of your app, some other apps, delivering it in a VDI or some other kind of similar package situation, and charging a monthly recurring revenue fee for it that can be greater than the sum of the parts and raise all boats. I think it's this is just an example of a way to integrate apps together. There's lots of different ways to do that in different platforms and whatever, but just remember that the end user customer is buying holes, they're not buying drills, and helps to think about that. Okay. I'll skip that one, that doesn't apply to much of our group here today. Okay. So when you come up with a recurring revenue model, some of the people here call that a SaaS model, but I think that's a narrow view. I think recurring revenue models can be much wider. But when you take your app or your product and you come up with a design for something that's going to be recurring revenue, you often need a hook. The people buying it expect some kind of a hook. You don't have to supply a hook, but it can help. So one of the hooks you can supply is more frequent updates. That could be something that gets people interested in paying the monthly fee. Oh, I get more frequent updates. That's great, right? So you change your development cycle, so instead of having updates every year or two, you might be popping out, you might come up with all of them, but only release them, every month or two or something like that. So more frequent updates can help. Adobe's been doing this with a new DC product line. They used to only rev it once every couple of years, and now they're revving it once a month all of a sudden, starting in November. We were surprised to see that. You might have some features available in the monthly service model that are not available in the purchase model, for example, if you also offer a purchase model. That's a technique that works pretty well. Think about annual commitments versus monthly pay. So customers like paying a monthly bill. They don't want to pay an annual bill. Annual bill seems a lot bigger. Even if the monthly fees add up to be greater than the annual fee, it's emotional. So you have to deal with the fact that your customers are emotional creatures, and they'd like to see monthly fees. And you can have an annual commitment that lowers the price of the monthly fee. That's a technique that works pretty well. So you can have annual fees and monthly fees and play with it, the pricing, to see what your customers respond to and where you can have essentially revenue maximization, depending upon your particular app and the particular marketplace you're going into. A monthly model is easier for clients, for end users, for clients to purchase. They feel if there's no commitment, then, it's okay, I may or may not use it, but let me just try it for a while. Whereas a lot of people are put off by a more expensive product that's, you buy a license in perpetuity or a yearly type license. But that increases sales with certain categories of customer because it, in essence, it cuts the liability of the customer for that financial commitment. They don't feel locked in. The customers will tend to keep the product longer if it's a monthly pay than if it's an annual commitment. If it's an annual commitment, people put in their calendar, next, August 23rd, I bet you've done that before. August 23rd, I'm going to call up genealogy.com and cancel it because they charge me every year and I'm not sure I'm going to use it next year and whatever. But if it was monthly, your likelihood of doing that is less, and you might keep the service for a longer period of time. And that makes a difference to the software manufacturer or the app developer. And other reasons, backup and disaster recovery. If you have an app that goes on a local device and has data, or on a PC or a Mac, or some other kind of tablet, and there's valuable data there that could be messed up if the app gets lost, stolen, whatever. You can, as part of your monthly fee program, you can add in backup disaster recovery type services where you're sucking the data out to a data center. Now we're used to that with lots of cloud apps, but not all of them do that sort of thing. And that's a feature you can add in, and that's a reason some people will buy the app. And the final thing is just do it. You don't actually have to have a hook. It helps. But we've seen some apps that have gone to market with a monthly fee model and have worked fine with just the do-it philosophy. But it helps if you can give some extra benefits in your terms and conditions to for your end user customer to be able to do that.
I have another one for you.
Yeah.
One that I've noticed is a good hook also if they contribute somehow to the content. They're not just consuming the content, also they add something to it. They feel it's theirs now. Even if they just mark something as a favorite, they give them a local list of quotes, for example, they choose a few of them as a favorite, they feel they kind of like personalize it for the customization stuff like this. If you let them write their own quotes over there, it's even better.
Sort of like the open source model, but kind of a micro version of that.
It doesn't have to be shared with others.
Right.
As long as they contribute some to the content that they like, because they always will write something that they like. So once they put it there, you just provide them the framework to hold the content in
Right.
as well.
Right, exactly. No, that's good. That's good. And when you're thinking about the feature and benefit set of the software you might be working with, it can help to put, take off these glasses and put on another pair of glasses and go, okay, if each of these features was in a recurring revenue model, how would that change the way I think about this program? It just kind of, it's you kind of have to peel back layers of the onion to try and figure this out, but so often when we write code, we think about, or when we develop products, we think about, oh, we create the product, they sell the product, that's it. But if you tie in the whole concept of recurring revenue models into this, it can actually affect the way you develop the app and think about the feature set you're going to end up with at the end. So I think it's something that designers should be thinking about a lot more than they do. I think oftentimes this is a sales marketing department decision about how they're going to produce and sell the thing. And I think we have some good examples of that. Well, I guess the most obvious one right now is Adobe and its new PDF model. So when they first came out with the monthly fee model, you didn't really get much for it. In fact, I got nothing. They were the last slide, don't use the hook. Just, oh, you can buy a license perpetual for Adobe or Acrobat, or you can buy a monthly fee, your choice. And the break-even point, this is interesting, the break-even point's about 2 years, 2.5 years. So Adobe figured out, apparently their marketing department said, oh, people are susceptible to the monthly fee if the payback period is around that 2.5 year period, and we can maximize our revenue when we hit that number. So it's kind of interesting calculation companies go through about this. But what happened with Adobe is, they sold so many, and then it kind of, I think it flattened out. But just 4 months ago, as I said, they're now revving the product monthly. And they're actually adding things to it sometimes every month. And they're sending blog posts out now. They're sending, if you sign up, for the fee, you're now getting tips that come in on at least a monthly basis. Kind of helps reinforce the model. So that's kind of a different way of thinking. Oh, with recurring revenue, you instead of just throwing the app out there and going, fine, we're just going to keep writing code over here, you can throw the app out there and then add content to it, add extra features like you're talking about. How to use this, tips, tricks, kind of build more of an ecosystem around it, and think of your customers as partners. So,
if you have a key tool that you use, like Adobe Photoshop, for instance,
yeah,
that you've been using for years, and suddenly you switch to a model where you have to subscribe to it, there may be a concern among consumers that if I suddenly decide that I'm not going to continue paying for this, suddenly I've lost access to that tool, whereas in the past, I bought it, I can use it as much as I want. How do you counter that fear that consumers may have? Personally, I haven't bought a new Adobe product since they moved to that model.
I don't think you can use it once it's gone, it's gone. I think you can create PDF versions of it because the source application is not there. You cannot launch and make changes. They're not even a single change. You're done.
Right.
Yeah.
All you create a PDF and store it.
Lots of that.
With Photoshop, the source is actually, well, not the source, but the code is actually on your PC or your Mac. However, it phones home constantly, like
DRM,
ET,
here's a DRM.
and it turns it off if you stop the subscription. So yeah, you're right. It's interesting. Manufacturers have dealt with this in different ways. Some of them do both. They'll allow you to have a purchase model or the monthly model, because they've said, oh, customers like you are of a concern to us. And then there's other companies that have done the math and go, customers like you are really old-fashioned, and we can make a lot more money if we just forget about those kind of customers. And you see that Adobe made that move, right? They haven't made it with PDF yet. They made it partially with PDF. You can still buy a license for PDF, a perpetual license, but I'll tell you, it's hard to buy it. They don't have it on their website. You can only buy it through Adobe dealers, and who source it through places like Tech Data and Ingram, and it's fairly difficult to buy the perpetual license now. Eventually, I assume they're just going to kill it, but that's what they've done with Photoshop and the other apps. So you're right. If you have the market cloud to do it, you've got a great position, go for it, and you saw what it did to Adobe's revenue. So it didn't hurt them.
So it sounds like it might be best to go to a hybrid model where you can satisfy both, unless you feel that you're a gorilla that can force people to go to the more expensive
Well,
model.
or a gorilla in your niche. You can be a really small company and be a dominant player in your niche. You can also decide, hey, it's just too much trouble for us to have these different models. We're just going to focus on one and just do it. I think it really depends on your vision of who your customers are and what they like. And I think in the right certain client base, you might turn people off. And other clients are like, oh, we don't care. That's how we buy Netflix. So of course, it's not going to be a problem. So let's see. We have another 15 minutes, right? 2:15 is that the time schedule? Okay, so what I want to do now, I think this is the fun part. This is all fun anyway, and it's a pleasure to be here. This is cool. I thought it'd be fun if any of you have a product you want to talk about, and the rest of us can kind of help brainstorm recurring revenue models around it. And a real example is a good one, if you want. And these can be not only recurring revenue models for the general public, but there's another interesting concept of creating recurring revenue models for internal company operations and enterprises. So we can talk about that too.
What would be that? You mean like charge internally for?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, charge.
Well, I mean, well, just 2 minutes on that. So, anybody ever talk to people in the corporate IT department in big companies? Ever ask them how busy they are?
Yeah.
Oh my God, they're crazy busy. They can't stand it. Their budgets are always cut. Doesn't matter who it is. They never have enough IT folks to support stuff. And so, a recurring revenue model used inside a company with chargebacks and stuff can actually fund the IT people that are required to service that particular app if the app's important to the company's operations. So you can play internal games with finance that way and to staff the IT folks.
But the problem is getting the initial budget to get going. I think that's where the struggle is, because most of them are cost centers.
Yes.
Right, everybody pours money in.
Yeah.
Some people will be sucking a lot, and some of them won't be using it at all.
Right.
There's no mechanism for them to.
Now, one of the things about a recurring revenue model from a business perspective, if you were to try to study this in business school or something, is you have, because it's monthly and because you want the cost to be as low as possible so people will buy it, but you still want to have a nice healthy profit going on. The most important thing to know from the financial side is what your costs are. What are the costs that are going to this? What are the pennies you pay for this and the pennies you pay for that and the dollar you pay for this and whatever, and really get a good idea of what those costs are before you can set a price. I see so many people just go, oh, my app's going to be, $2 a month or $5 a month or $399 a month or whatever, but they haven't thought about the cost part, and you can't really leverage your revenue unless you really know that and design the system. That also applies to in-house models, because the IT department inside companies, the people that support apps, they're never really costed properly.
It's very expensive.
They're expensive, and they're treated as a sunk cost. Oh, damn, it's another salary, But if their time is tracked and they're costed out, you can come up with cost-benefit reasons why internal, recurring revenue models or recurring cost billing models inside a company can work too. But it's this whole SaaS thing we talk about, software as a service. It's transformed a lot of things, but there's still an awful lot of the software industry that doesn't work that way, and there's an awful lot of other industries too.
Well, just as an example, I had County of Sonoma was a client, and they did a user survey to their internal customers. So I'm talking about the corporate IT department.
Yeah.
Because they were providing 24-hour phone, customer service to their internal. They did a survey. They found out people didn't even know it was available. So they were able to really contain their costs by just cutting back on the services that through the surveys and understanding what their needs were.
Right, and one way to think about the costing is you're providing not only a piece of software or a product on some kind of a fee basis, but you're providing a market basket of services, right? And it's not only software as a service, it could be hardware as a service, it could be support built in and training built in and all these other things that can be built into this package that whoever your customer is, whether internal to your company or out in the open marketplace, might be interested in buying if they like the set of stuff that's in that package. So it's not just the app, it's, again, what the app's used for and how it's used and how it integrates.
There's one I used to run IT before. One of the biggest pushbacks I get is IT is not supposed to be a profit center. That means you're taking revenue or increasing the price. That means I can lower the price selling to the customer. A whole bunch of political things come into play. So that's why I think your model is awesome. They rather pay that extra money for an external provider they will not pay internal provider because IT is not supposed to be a profit center. So that's a big pushback.
Right, right. And unfortunately, that's the way a lot of it's gone, even though, in my opinion, IT is the big enabler of a lot of companies even being alive.
They don't adopt it.
Yeah, because, you know, the bottom line is, technology is a tool, right? It's just like a shovel. It's no more or less sexy than a shovel. And the reason you use a shovel is so you can move more sand per time or more dirt than you can with your hands, right? And if there's ROI based on the cost of the shovel, and you use the shovel, you're being smart. And if you don't use a shovel, you go to the beach and use your hands instead of a shovel, you're shooting yourself in the foot, right? So many companies shoot themselves in the foot constantly on this issue because they're not thinking about tech as a profit center, or to put it another way, they're not thinking about tech as a revenue generator and a productivity enhancer. It's funny, I've seen that change over the years. It used to be, it was thought more of that way, and it's thought less of that way now, so you're absolutely right. It's too bad, and I think it's wrong, but I think clever CIOs can get around that issue, but yeah, it's a problem. So, anybody have an app they want to talk about?
So you had mentioned earlier, not to take away from the app, but you had mentioned earlier that the ecosystem. Do you have an image of what that looks like?
Not exactly. Well, these are all the slides I had today, but the ecosystem I'm talking about is the fact that so often, at least in the software industry, and you do chips. Did you design software for the chips, or are you on the hardware side?
Just on the hardware side, and there is software
Yeah.
that has to be developed for testing or for building evaluation modules for customers.
Mm-hmm. So when I talk about the ecosystem, I think what I usually am thinking about is the way you can bring in partners, other apps, hardware products to create, and terms and conditions of contracts to create a recurring revenue model for a particular use case. So I'll give you a crazy example. At your firm, perhaps you could design a chip that came with a certain amount of service that supplied a cybersecurity need, and you, instead of selling the chips to Apple for a particular price, you could sell a chip to Apple for a particular price with the service built in and have a recurring revenue model on your chip, right? Instead of charging $50 for the chip, charge $5 a month for the chip, as long as the device is still in use, or something like that. So one of the most important inventions, I think, in the history of the world from a financial perspective and a revenue generation model was the invention of insurance. Insurance is not a normal product in the sense you can't see it. But the insurance industry, insurance type products, there aren't that many of them compared to what they could be. And a recurring revenue model, in a way, is an insurance contract, right? So the health insurance industry, as much as people dump on them, runs pretty well. That engine is an economic engine that really works. And in essence, the insurance industry charges a monthly fee, or a yearly fee, whatever, you charge for these services, and then you can pretty much use whatever you want on healthcare. You have deductibles and copays and stuff, but they've taken a really complicated subject that you normally would go to the doctor for and you pay fees for something, and they turned it into a recurring revenue model where you pay a monthly fee to handle whatever you want from an insurance perspective. So translate that to a manufacturer of a hardware product. Any hardware product could be sold on an insurance type contract basis where you could maximize your revenue by charging, let's just a simple case, a monthly fee for a Next thermostat as opposed to buying it, right? And the company, the person that buys it pays a monthly fee. The thing's operating because it's hooked into your website, right? Isn't that great to know that all of us with Nest thermostats have Google's system right in our house? Great, Internet of Things. But they're supplying services, they're doing things with that. There's no reason that couldn't be a monthly revenue model, and a lot of people would be happy to buy a thermostat if it costs $5 a month instead of $150 or whatever. So maybe it's not the best example, but you can turn hardware products into monthly recurring revenue models. I think a lot of people haven't thought about that enough. And there can be, in the right product, there could be a tremendous benefit to the end user customer for that. In ways we didn't think about before. I mean, nobody thought about renting software by the month until, not that long ago. There's lots of other industries ripe for that, and areas of the software business, yeah. Oh, sorry, next.
Yeah, I have 5 apps on the App Store, and I'm just, one of them I'm selling, and it just sells $2.99 for the last 5 years.
Yeah.
But the other one I was giving away for free, but now the customer base grew, and they still can keep downloading. So now I want to add some kind of add-on, like in-app purchases to those as a subscription maybe. And the first app I want to do it for is called a Reminder, which is like ergonomics reminder for you as you sit on your desk and reminds you of things. It gives you micro exercises.
Great.
So I kind of wrote down last week or so a list of things I can know from. One is I can extend the library of micro exercises. If maybe it's a one-time purchase, not very interesting, I'm looking for recurring revenue.
Yeah.
So that's why maybe you should offer like subscription updates. So basically, they can automatically get a new subscriptions all the time. Then
Right.
the idea I told you just a minute ago, another one, if they subscribe, they also have additional features. They can write their own micro exercises or whatever. Then they can be a part of a community, which kind of creates a lot of micro exercises shared with each
Great.
other.
That adds extra value, and you can charge a monthly fee for that. That's a great hook.
Yeah, I've been sitting on this app like for 6 years. It's been like going on, and but
People like it, that's good.
So I'm just now want to convert this more like a freemium model, but freemium not to one-time purchase, but more like to recurring.
Yep. And any of those things you can brainstorm about your app or your piece of hardware or your service offering. You can do this also with professional services, right?
Yeah.
And they call it a retainer, but you can make it sexier than that. And you can add all sorts of things in, partnering with other people, like partner with a yoga studio that'll give you a yoga move of the week. You can do it at your desk, right? Or
Yeah, I'm just thinking, if you create a channel, there'll be a lot of people who want to partner with you, right?
Right.
Kind of push their content.
Exactly. Be a mini version of what Apple did, right? Here's my app, it does this, but you can pay slight amounts of monthly fees or recurring revenue fees, and you get these extra little plugin modules. Wow, and you don't have to write them. Why do we have to always write everything ourselves? It drives me crazy.
But
Right?
probably do yourself.
Partner, and that's kind of what I'm talking about with ecosystem is, I think the whole concept of partnering not only with software integrations, but hardware integrations as well, and service integrations.
Does Apple allow that though? Does Apple allow that? To have your own subscription model and also be working with other partners and bring.
Well, you have to plug the partners yourself.
Okay.
Yeah.
As long as Apple gets the 30% cut, they'll
They don't care. You had a question?
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, I mean, I guess, I was thinking about the car market, so I have a Toyota Prius, like if I just subscribe to the Prius and I got a new model every year, I'd be pretty happy.
Right.
I mean, I think the market, it seems like it's going more towards, right now, like more towards a car sharing model where I pay, one of the car companies to just.
That's a
go.
recurring revenue model. But there's no reason you shouldn't be able to go and buy, Ford pickup truck on a monthly fee basis. Now they do that, they call it financing, and I hear GM makes more money on their financing department than they do on selling the truck, right? So that's how valuable a monthly pay model can be, even at a low rate of interest. It can really make a difference. So there's an example of productizing a recurring revenue model, a vehicle. So you can do it with hardware. I think we don't think about it enough, so I think it's interesting to ponder those situations where we're not doing it now or where we could be doing it. So think about your own apps, your own software, adding features, adding partnerships, adding services. So you got services, hardware and software that can be put together in a package to solve real world problems for your customer. And do it in a way that can make you a lot of money.
Were you having problems with this screen?
I'm all set. I'm good.
Okay.
That's good. Took 45 minutes to get. So that's about tech being overburdened, right? So how much more time in this session do we have today? I'm sorry,
I think there are 15 more.
We have 15 more? Okay.
Is it 45 minutes or half an hour? 45.
That's 45, so I think we're done. Anyway, guys, thanks for coming. Really appreciate it.
That was interesting.
Hopefully I gave you something to think about.
Yeah.
But
Thank you.
kind of recurring revenue models are the holy grail. See if you can find a way to do it.
It seems like, I mean, like I could just go start a company today. In the old days, it would have been like a Microsoft resale or something, but it'd just be
Right.
like an app, get a couple of apps working together, and
Yes.
get a hosting partner.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I'm a channel partner myself. Yeah.
Absolutely. And, you know, you don't necessarily have to write any code at all, you just can integrate it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
What kind of companies do you work with then? Are they more like app vendors or?
Mostly in the past couple years, we've done a lot of work with companies with accounting apps,
Okay.
different kinds of accounting apps. And so we've been, you know, integrating them with other kinds of accounting apps, or
Yeah.
with spreadsheets, or, I mean, you know, you can actually take an accounting app and put it in a data center and put Excel with it. You know, Excel, everyone has Excel, right? Well, it turns out when it's with the app, you can do some stuff. It's easier for the client than cutting and pasting data, and,
Right.
you know.
It's funny, I have a friend who makes a great living out of just consulting on Excel and.
Yeah, yeah, one of the biggest apps in the world, but, so we've been doing more work recently with legacy accounting apps, you know, stuff
Oh,
that
okay.
you can breathe new life into it by putting it in a data center.
Yeah,
And, you know, there's a lot of apps out there that solve, you know, important problems for companies. They've been around for years and years, and the company doesn't want to rewrite it. It's expensive to rewrite it for new stuff, and so we can actually, you know, speed it up and give it more sexy life by moving it to a data center.
right.
So it's something that a lot of people don't think about, but
Yeah, that's interesting.
it's finally economically feasible to do that. Didn't used to be.
How big is your company?
I've got 14 people in San Mateo.
Oh, okay. And do you have global customers or what?
We do, mostly North and South America. Mostly, not too many in South America, mostly North America.
Yeah.
We've got some in Europe. It's a question of what data centers you put the apps in and how close they are to the customer. So there's a plumbing problem.
Oh, right.
So in the U.S. now, the data centers that are used most, or that are most effectively used are in the Midwest, because it's the shortest distance from most people in the country. We do have some customers in Paris, and believe it or not, using a data center in the Midwest by a company in Paris is really quick and fast. And,
Interesting, yeah.
yeah, and it all has to do with the way the pipes go across the
Yeah,
ocean.
right.
Right, and there's a pipe from Paris, a big one, that just goes right into New York and right across the country. So,
Oh,
so you can host stuff in the center of the states, and as long as it doesn't violate European laws, you can. Otherwise, we use data centers in other countries. Like in Europe, we have some where we have to use a data
You have to
center
have it. It
in
has to be
Germany or
in-
France or
in
Norway. And,
European, right.
yeah, it's got to be in the EU to satisfy some of the requirements for privacy. Depends on what kind of data you got. So
Great. Do you have a card?
I do.
Yeah, I
Good
just
luck.
want to get your card,
Sure.
because sorry, I kind of missed the beginning of your presentation.
Well, good luck on your apps. I think it's a great idea. You've got a free app that people want, so
Yes,
let's make some money with it,
Mark,
huh?
let's see what Mark is gonna say.
Thanks, Alex.
Interesting to kind of see how that, I'm not from you guys, like how you do subscriptions, maybe I'll just text you and just
Yeah.
some ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I've been turning things into service model, or recurring revenue models for a couple decades now. The first one I did was in 2001, and people were like, wow, what is this? This is crazy.
Yeah, right.
Especially when you do it on a product where on some of the instances you don't make money. So this is something I didn't talk about today, but you know, the insurance industry, the way they work is there are some clients that make lots of money on because they never get sick. And other clients
Yes,
are always getting
right,
sick,
right,
and it costs them a ton of money, and they lose on those people. Now, in the software industry, do we ever sell a software package to someone where we lose money? Not usually, unless the support load is crazy.
Unless we think we're gonna get a big contract from them.
Right. But I would rethink that and go, hey, there's money to be made by pricing things such that, and providing some services, so you do lose on some clients, and you make it on others, and the net result can be better for everybody, and you might completely miss that if you don't think about it that way.
I'm Marty Shelton, by the way.
Hey, Marty, nice to know you, it's a pleasure.
Worked for IBM for years, and we used to have that
Oh, cool.
recurring
Thank you.
revenue model
Oh,
all the
great.
time. It
Thanks,
made
Pamela.
a lot of money. Hardly ever wanted to go to any one-time charge type of model.
No, IBM actually, you're right, they were one of the innovators.
Session where you unload those
Just about everything was, went away from that kicking and screaming.
Yeah, and that goes back a long time, I think.
Well,
That's-
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and I liked in your talk, you were talking about VDI, which is now workspace, but you know, like that's a lot of like the old IBM terminal. I mean, like it's all, everything just circles
Oh, yeah,
around and gets
comes around
renamed.
again.
I remember, yeah, and the way you set your terms and conditions for that can be really interesting. So, and IBM was a
sure.
master at it. So I got one story, I don't know if you ever heard this one, but some old guy told me this one day. He said, you know, he said, I worked for IBM, and he said, we had this printer that would go in data centers, and it was a really fast printer, and it would cost so much a year or something to have a printer with your service contract, everything is bundled in. It was great, right? And I can't remember what the number was, $5,000 a year or something for the printer, let's just say. And they also had a higher speed printer, and it cost like $10,000 a month, higher speed printer, right? And so when the company decided it wanted a higher speed printer, the sales guys and everybody made sure nobody was in the data center, and they would go into the data center with a pair of pliers. They go in the back of the printer, and they'd clip one wire. And by clipping one wire, it doubled the speed of the printer, and all put together, and nobody knew, and they could charge it the $10,000.
Oh, they did that all the time, all the time. There's a bit to flick here or something like that.
Yeah.
But people knew.
Yeah.
They weren't licensed for it.
Right,
I mean,
exactly. Yeah.
But they knew that it could do
Yeah.
more.
The old
really easily.
benchmark studies that were always like juiced up, and the database wars that, I was with a database company, Sybase and Oracle, and everybody was like juicing these numbers, you know, running without anything else.
Yeah, so you can get real creative with those recurring models, and I think it's a great way to make money for companies. And I think
And then they'd up it by 15%, you know, for versions X, Y, Z, right?
Right.
You talked about adding additional function and feature. Sure, you put the additional function and feature in version X, X1 or something like that, and
right.
15% more, 15% more, 15% more.
Yeah, no, IBM's impressive about that. They've
Well, don't do it anymore.
no.
That's why I'm looking for a job.
Okay, well, good. Good luck.
Good day.
Thanks for coming. Have a great day.